So my main identity professionally is a counseling psychologist. When I went to my doctoral program, the emphasis was marriage and family therapy, so child and family therapy. So I have my main identity professionally is counseling psychology with an MFT emphasis. And psychology department right over here. So fourth of you guys are, or maybe a fifth of you guys are my section.
Okay, so I'm Charity Vasquez. I'm also a professor here in the psychology department. I'm the program director for MS and Child Life program here. And my professional identity, professionally, I'm a certified child life specialist. So I've worked in the clinical hospital world with hospitalized children for many, many years. I've been in the field for about 20 years, and so it's been learning and growing and learning more about children, and now I'm in the academic setting and working with students.
So my name is Stacy, and I'm a social worker with Children and Family Services in San Bernardino County. And psych was my major when I was in college, and I've gone on to get a master in marriage family counseling, and I do have a license in that, but I'm just choosing to be here at this point and see what doors gets open in the future.
My name is Craig Connor. I'm an LCSW. Started off here at APU for undergrad in social work, and then went to USC to get my master's, and then from there went to work for Psych Hospital, Metropolitan State Hospital down in Norwalk. I was there for 6 years, and then from there I moved to where I'm at currently, which is at Pacific Clinics here in Covina. And I'm a team leader, so I oversee clinicians and a team of case managers. And so that's currently where I'm at. Before that, I was out in the field doing what they're doing now, just helping out in a different way. So.
What kinds of careers do people in your area often pursue?
Yeah, I'll start.
Yeah.
So from a counseling psychology perspective, folks who get a doctorate in counseling psychology end up in college counseling centers, veterans hospitals, VA hospitals, private practice, community mental health practices. And similar, there's a lot of overlap with MFT. So private practice, hospitals, community mental health practices, and those are and then academia for if you go into, not as many people go into academia, but sometimes folks do.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. So in those people who goes into child life go into many directions. One area is working as a certified child life specialist in the hospital. You may or may not have heard it before, or you might have, but it almost sounds we're not in a secret society. So it's out there. It's actually a field. So in the hospital, what child life specialist does is they prepare children for procedure surgeries and any kind of diagnosis that they're going to go through. They also help them normalize their environment in the hospital by helping them be children and helping them with their developmental tasks still, even while in the hospital setting. Working with siblings to help them cope with their siblings' hospitalization, doing parent education and all of that, including grief facilitating, and also doing school reintegration where they become the liaison between the hospital and the school, and explaining why the classmate has been in the hospital for so long and what that means, that they're not going to catch cancer and all that concept. Aside from the hospital, child life specialists have also gone on to other alternate setting. One area is working in palliative care and hospice setting. Other areas could be private practice. Other area is in trauma and stress early intervention area. any type of advocacy setting, any type of outpatient clinic settings, to some have done international work as well as in dental and court systems. So there's a variety of areas that they do, because the study is very focused on children in trauma and stress and in those situations from 0 to young adults. So yeah, I think that's pretty much sums up all of it.
So the opportunities are just limitless for you guys. I started in psych, and then I thought of getting a school psychology master, and decided against that. I went to seminary instead, got my MDiv there, and then decided I want to go to counseling. So I went and got my master in MFT, and then I got my license. I could have gone into private practice, chose not to. I chose to have children instead, and took about 12-year break taking care of my kids. Yeah, well, right. So I was home with my kids for about 12 years, and I actually just started this job that I have for the last 2 years. And so, I mean, whatever it is that you guys want to do, it's limitless. You don't have to stay with psych. I had a double major, so I could have gone into linguistic. Didn't want to go there. So the future is just there for you. Just explore, have fun. You could have, from here, you could have gone and get your MSW and go on again in LCSW. It's just, the future's there for you.
I agree. Social work is a very broad field, and that was actually one of the things that kind of drew me into it. If you like working with kids and families, you can do that. If you enjoy working with adults, seniors, if you want to work in a medical facility, if you want to work in a corporate facility, if you want to work at a school, I mean, it's very, very broad-based. So it's really a good opportunity kind of, now that you guys have, is just kind of see what your interests are and where you're at. Specifically for the company that I work for, Pacific Clinics is the largest nonprofit mental health agency in the San Gabriel Valley. There's a lot of different programs that specialize with different students, different adults. The program that I work with, well, I'll get into that, I guess that's the next question. But, you have the opportunity to work individually as a therapist. There's opportunities as team supervisors, program directors. There's a lot as far as where you might be interested and the populations that you might be interested in working with.
So Craig, why don't we move on to that next question of what exactly drew you to your discipline? How did you come to discover that that was part of your vocation or calling?
I actually started here at APU because when I started here, I had, I'm laughing because it was a really long time ago, but when I
How
was,
long ago?
back when I had hair and I could see my feet. I started off in Mount Sac, and I was getting my GE stuff taken care of, but at that time I was considering actually being an airline pilot, and so at that time I had to decide if I was going to be, go to Embry-Riddle, which is an aeronautical university in Arizona, or here, and I felt at the time, I think God called me here. But so I was going to be a communications major. I had no idea what that was, so, but as part of that, I had to take some psychology classes, and actually, Matt Toohey, who was a social work professor here for a really long time, to answer your question, he was the one that really drew me into the field of social work, and he got me thinking, because there was one day in class he said that Jesus was the first social worker, and I was just like, what? And he elaborated, because, Jesus, he didn't hang out with all the people that had it together, or, he hung out with the sinners, and, the people that, were on the fringes of society, kind of the outcasts. And so I've always really liked the opportunity to help people. And so I became a Christian my senior year of high school, and I really enjoyed working with like middle school age kids at that time. And so just the opportunities of being able to work in that field with children and families was something that I really wanted to do. My time at Metro, and I'll wrap it up here. Metropolitan State Hospital is a locked facility, and at the time that I was working there, we were working with kids that were kicked out of psychiatric hospitals throughout the state of California. So it was a locked facility. It was very intense. But prior to that, I had worked on the adult inpatient units there with people that, both men and women that had been found guilty by reason of insanity. And so being able to kind of work with them, there's this repeated theme of, they would say, like in our conversations together, they would say, you know, if somebody just would have reached out to me, or if I would have been able to get this type of service, you know, when I was younger, I think my life could have changed. And so to be able to kind of be able to have an opportunity to speak into children's lives and families' lives and give them a sense of hope, that's something. There's one quote that said, "We're all broken, and that's how the light gets in." And it's by Hemingway. And then I'm going to read this part because I love that in my job, God can use us to be a light to the lost and broken world, to bring hope and healing, and to be able to share Christ's love through our actions. So many people need the hope that only God can provide. And so my end quote would be one by Mother Teresa, and it says, "God doesn't require us to succeed, He only requires that you try." And so to answer your question, it's just, you know, being able to work with people is something that I enjoy, and being able to help is something I enjoy. And these jobs leading up to the one I have now have given me that opportunity. So.
I've always loved working with children. From a young age, I've taught Sunday school, and even through college and grad school. Always been children and families, always been my passion. So it was only natural for me to work in county. So I'm a social worker for county, San Bernardino County Child Welfare. So any of you guys who have worked with children, worked in counseling, who are mandated reporters, you're mandated by law to call into the child abuse hotline of that county and file a suspected child abuse report. So those reports would go through supervisors and get assigned to me and my coworkers, and we would go out, we make contact with the families unannounced, we never announce our presence because we don't want them to know we're there, and we investigate those child abuse reports. And most of the time, we don't remove the children, but if we do remove the children, then we have to do all these paperwork, write all these reports, and give them services so that the parents can be unified with their children. Our primary goal is always for the children to be reunified with their families rather than be in foster care or group homes or relative care placement. I always make a point to pray for my families. I don't pray with them, even though I would like to. The power differential is just too great between me and my clients that I don't pray when I'm with them, but I pray for them, and I pray before I go there that, you know, God would just give me the wisdom to make the right decision. Because you have to decide on the spot as you're talking to the children, as you're interviewing them all alone, as you're talking to the families, as you're talking to collaterals, if you are going to remove these kids or not, or if you're going to leave them in that home, or if the allegations that are brought against these parents are true or not true. So it's very much on the spot sort of decisions, very quick, and you have to be able to think on your feet really quickly and know the questions to ask, write all those notes down so that you can document it. Like, the county is really big on documentation. There's state databases that we're mandated to input into that anyone in the state can have access to. So, you know, I think my faith is essential, just doing well and thriving in this field, because it's the craziness that you see, the things that happen to children, and the things that parents do to children is just really sad. And I think without being grounded in your faith, you lose hope in humanity. And in social work, you can't lose hope in humanity. You always expect the best of your clients and the best of the children. I mean, we see children who are in mental hospital. I was telling Craig I have to go to one of the mental hospitals and see a child who is there due to self-injurious behavior, and she's been there over a week and she's still there. And try to work with the families to stabilize these children so that they can be safe with their families.
So you always heard about the saying that God already know where you're gonna be before you realize it, right? And so that has been my journey in all these career trajectory that I've gone into. Growing up, I've always wanted to be a missionary, and I wanted to be a pediatrician, right? And at one point, I said, Africa. Fast forward, I, didn't realize that being a pediatrician isn't my journey until I actually then started taking classes that has to do with children, and I realized that that is a different passion then. So then one day I was passing by, my stories are very interconnected. I'm named by a missionary named Charity Carmen. And so my family and I came to the United States, and we were going to visit Charity, who lives in Redlands. It so happens she lives there. So we're passing by, and we passed by Loma Linda Children's Hospital. I was in high school, and I said, oh, I think I'm gonna work there one day. Did not know that. What happened, I ended up meeting somebody in college, through my mom, really, taking classes, and she happened to be the child life manager of Loma Linda at that time. And then I ended up falling in love with the field of child life then, and then next thing you know, I started volunteering there and ended up starting to work as a child life assistant. And then an opportunity came for me to do an internship, and it just kind of fell in where I was doing my internship there, and then also over at UC Irvine Medical Center as an intern, right? So then I did my internship, and then right as soon as I was done, a door opened up where somebody left a position, and I was pretty much recruited to take that position on even before I got my bachelor. And that was all God's doing. I feel like that, because then the next thing you know, I'm working as a child specialist for many years, and then there was an opportunity for me to work with grant programs and with county programs, working with pregnant moms in perinatal area and pregnant teens and various substance area as well. And so I'm doing that. That then led me a child life manager position at UC Irvine Medical Center, where I did my internship. Who would have thought I would have ended up there running their child life program, right? So, but I was also given that job because I had my experience with perinatal and with pregnant teens and pregnant moms as well. Again, it was God's doing. So being there, and I loved it. I loved being at UC Irvine Medical Center. I was manager for many years. And then, have made a lot of changes there, and I was gonna retire from there. Because UC system, that's great.
APUs in the
And then, no. And then, APU, there was an opportunity at APU happened. I didn't want to say I refused it, but somebody told me about it, I didn't apply. A second person told me about it, I didn't apply. By the third person, okay, fine, I'll do it. By that time, the position was still open for I think, quite a few months. A week after I applied here, I was given a call. Next thing you know, I was given the opportunity to lead and to start up the Master in Child Life program here. And one of the interview that my department chair was telling me when I was in the interview was, so if whoever has this position, they're gonna have to go to Africa. Is that not crazy? Yeah. And so that was something that it dawned on me. I mean, like, yes, it should have dawned on me a long time ago, but but at that time, it's like this is God's plan for me. This is not only my my vocation, my career trajectory, but also to be here and to actually do mission work, which is also what I've always wanted to do as a child too. Is by being here, and so. I mean, that's a long story, but it's all relevant. That's my thing. But all in all, trust God and put faith in Him, and definitely explore. Like what everybody was saying, explore your ways. God will show you a way. Whatever isn't going to work out isn't going to work out. It's whatever isn't supposed to isn't for some reason. There are going to be some days where you're suffering. So there are some days that's where you're going to be feeling a lot of joy and all of that. And being in the field of child life, I've experienced that with a lot of families too. There were happy moments, there were sad moments, and even though my journey has been this way, and now I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I want to live for like 100 years more because I feel like I want to do more stuff, but I don't have that much time. So, yeah. So anyway, I go on a tangent, but so that's kind of like how my interest in my discipline started. Is just along the way of meeting the people that I've met along the ways that led me to where I am today. And again, it's going back to God already knows where you're going to be when you're going to be when you don't. So that's my story.
It's hard to follow up.
It's kind of complicated.
So there's actually, and I wrote this before you shared your
Okay, good.
There's actually.
He has a map.
I do. Well, I had a little time for this one. Vocational psychology or career psychology, there's a couple theories. One of them is happenstance theory. Like, I just happened to be in this class with a social work professor who said Jesus was the first social worker. And I was like, wow. There's also another one called chaos theory.
That's mine.
That's probably how mine too. So I was born and raised in Argentina. My parents are missionaries there still. Grandparents were missionaries in Mexico and Uruguay. And so when I was a kid, I thought I was going to do that. I was going to be a missionary. I was going to try to get as little education as possible and then go somewhere else, go and serve. And then I realized that how useful having a degree is, and how important, how many other doors might open with a bachelor's degree. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a bachelor's degree. Worked as a psychiatry technician with kids in it was a in-home residential therapy program, kids whose parents couldn't handle them anymore. So I have always had a passion for working with kids. After that experience, I realized that there's a lot more to working, a lot more that impacts the kids than just being loving on them. There's the family, there's systems of oppression and resources. And so then after that, I thought, well, I can't really do much that I want to do with my bachelor's degree. So I pursued a master's in clinical psychology. Was exposed to a lot of different theories of counseling, and was drawn a lot to psychoanalytic, psychodynamic theory, which is kind of this developmental theory that what impacts you early on and affects you later on in life. And also family systems, what's going on right now, and what's going on with mom right now impacts me, even though it's not a direct impact. And so I did therapy. I worked with families, and the families that were called in and had reports of allegations. I did in-home therapy with those families or the parents, because if not, they would lose their kids, or they had already lost their kids and they had to do therapy to get them back. And that was pretty heavy work for me. I realized that I didn't want to do that all full time. I was also kind of as I thought about clients, I also was just wondering about what else can I do to impact the system more broadly. One of the things that I could do is training and research. So then I pursued a PhD in counseling psychology, So counseling psychology has an emphasis of the interaction between the environment and the individual. So what happens in the environment impacts the individual and vice versa. With an MFT emphasis, so it was just a perfect fit for me. So I think that's a happenstance incident where it was like, I thought it was going this way, and then it happened to be just a great fit. And I think where I see, so a lot of my training has been clinical training as well. So I've gotten to do the research, the teaching, and then clinical work. I think where I see my identity as a Christian most clearly is when I'm sitting with a client, and that might be their one experience with a kind person. And even though my love is never going to be as good as God's love, I can try to do that in this moment with this person, whether I pray with them explicitly or not. But to be as close to accepting them for that they're human, because that's what God did for us. So now, like in my current position, I am super excited to do research for reaching these underserved populations and trying to understand how the system impacts the individual, and then building up leaders. You guys in my classes or my research lab, and kind of building up to be the future people that train or that work in clinical settings or that work with kids. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Great. So you mentioned degrees, and
Yeah.
getting degrees are important. But beyond degrees and taking classes, what kind of persons do you think excel in your area? I'm thinking about like traits or parts of one's character. If you guys can share about that.
All right. I'll take it. I think, goodness. I think with any of these fields, but especially with social work, being able to have a passion, helping people, being empathic, being compassionate. There's a lot of just being able to meet people kind of where they're at, and there's a lot of brokenness. The program that I work for, we work with, I don't think I shared that, we work with children who have either tried to hurt or kill themselves or someone else, and have been hospitalized, or they're at risk of losing their home or school placement due to their dangerous behaviors. So deal with a lot of kids that have been expelled, or repeatedly getting suspended, in and out of foster care or probation. And so our therapists and case managers go out into the field. We provide services out in the home or school setting, wherever they're having the most trouble. So they encounter a lot of different scenarios. They deal with a lot of severe mental illness, substance abuse, a lot of abuse and neglect. So getting back to the question, I think being able, there is a lot of brokenness there. So to be able to kind of be flexible, be able to think quickly on your feet, and just be humble and be a strong advocate. A lot of times our families and children have just been beaten down by life, and I think they feel really hopeless and helpless, and they're not too happy about it. So a lot of the teens that we work with are really angry and sad and depressed. And so to be able to kind of meet people where they're at, and to be able just to be compassionate and help them to know that there is hope, and that there are people that want to help. I should have led with this. Our program too, it really focuses on finding people's individual strengths and personal strengths. So to be able to, find in each person, what their strengths are. I had one lady when I worked at Metro, and she had a horrific life. She had been in and out of the hospital well over 20 different times. She had tried to kill herself 15 times. She was poor, she was addicted to meth, she had turned to prostitution, there was all kinds of things. And I had a there is a positive point to this. But at the time, my supervisor, I was just like, I can't find the strengths, I can't find, the hope. And she just said, the fact that she's still alive, that's a strength. And from there, to be able to see that, everybody has a strength. Everybody has gifts that God has given to them and talents that God has given to him or them. And just to be able to brush off some of that dirt and to see the children of God that they are. And so
I think working for any government or agency, one is given a tremendous amount of power. People never want to see me. I knock on their door, and of course they have to they don't have to open it, but they know they don't open it. I can go get a warrant and still enter, or have the police come and help me do what I need to do. So with so much power, I think it's important for one to be able to be compassionate with the families and meet them where they're at, but also make sure that their children are going to be safe once I leave that home. I think a person who's good in this field has to be very organized. You have to know, you got to be able to type, you got to be able to write, you got to be able to think quickly on your feet, you got to know what the law requires you to do, and you got to satisfy all the state mandates and the county mandates, so that you're not in trouble, the county's not in trouble. We also have a huge caseload, so being able to manage that to make sure that you do get to see everyone in the timeline that you're supposed to see them. Because sometimes we get immediate response referral. That means we have 1 hour to get to that home or to get to that child. Because we don't, that child is at risk of major bodily harm. At other times we have at least 10 days to get to a referral that can come to us.
So in the hospital setting, working with children and families and medical professionals, first you gotta be able to be comfortable with advocating for children. A lot of the time you become their voice, and even for the families as well. Because you've all been in medical setting where you feel like, oh, I don't want to be here, or I just want to throw up as soon as I walk in and whatnot. So being in that environment is going to need your somebody who is able to advocate and comfortably and confidently and competently. A critical thinker and a flexible individual is going to be really important, because in the hospital setting, things never go according to plan. You can have a child that's going to go to surgery at 7:15 in the morning, but then there are other things that happens, and now it's 4 o'clock. A child hasn't eaten yet, so they're having a hard time. Nobody can do anything about it, so what is the child specialist there going to do? So you got to be able to think quick and also be flexible in that. Speaking of thinking quick, you could be a child specialist that works in an emergency department, and that in itself is chaotic. And so you've got to be able to go from a trauma setting to a triage to whatever area it may be, and be able to think about interventions that's going to mostly help that child cope with being in the hospital in that moment, and be able to understand what's going on with them, and along with that, and is following directions is very important, as well as emotional regulation. Because hospital setting, we've talked about a lot of cases that are very extremely hard. In a hospital setting, it can be, emergency setting, you may not see it as difficult situation, but you might see that in ICU setting, NICU setting, or even oncology setting, or even patients that you've worked with for a long time that is, they don't have a good prognosis. And so then, somebody that, you gotta be able to learn how, you be aware of yourself. Self-awareness and self-regulation and emotional regulation is important in this. Teamwork. So this is not a profession where you do things on your own. You're either working with other child life specialists or you're working with other medical professionals, whether it be physician, OT, PT, speech, nurses, and whatnot. And in the classroom, sometimes you're assigned group work and you're like, oh my gosh, forget it. So and so is going to do more work less work than I do and whatnot. But guess what? It goes on. Group and teamwork, it's important because it gets done here so that you learn how to communicate with each other about dynamics in classrooms, so that when you're in the professional world, it makes sense. Because you gotta be able to be the person who works well in the team, otherwise it creates chaos out there. Outside the box thinker a lot, because working with children, they're all different, and so certain interventions are not going to work with one child, but it might work with another child. So you gotta be able to think outside the box and be able to contain yourself if something doesn't go according to you, how you planned it. So that's a little bit of a nutshell, and you have to also like the hospital because that's a bulk of your internship. So yeah.
I had this one about knowing yourself. I think when you think about individual therapy, historically, when you think about like Freud and back in the day, it was like you have to be a blank slate, and you have to have worked on everything yourself and whatever's going on in the room is the patient's. And we know now that that's not true. I was thinking of a word that I shouldn't. That doesn't make sense. That it's impossible to shut yourself off. And so being able to be aware of when you're getting angry with a client or getting frustrated with a mom or want to go after the dad, to be able to understand that and be aware of what's going on in yourself. And then also to know your limitations. I think to be aware that this is a lifelong process of growing and of learning more and being aware of learning about yourself, learning about people. I think another piece is curiosity. So especially with if you want to go into a PhD, it's not as much about smarts, it's just about endurance. And so if you can have if your curiosity can let you persist, then you'll do well. So I think just being curious about human behavior, why does this happen? Another piece is that one type of intervention isn't going to work with everybody. You might have two people with the same presenting concerns, the same problems, the same family background, and one person responds great and the other person doesn't respond well at all. So being able to enjoy that, take that as a challenge and wanting to roll with that and figuring it out with the client or the patient. I've got persistence and patience of the other ones.
So you guys have somewhat hinted on this already, but what do you think are some of the hardest aspects of your career and some of the more challenging parts of your job? I know you guys have mentioned that a little bit, but what would people have to be comfortable with, as you mentioned, hospital setting?
Yeah, so for child life, yes, definitely you gotta be comfortable with the hospital setting. That also means that you gotta be comfortable in being in procedures as well. Because a lot of your work as child life specialist and starting with internship, clinically speaking, is you're actually in procedures and you're there for the child. You're helping them and you're explaining things to them as things are happening, and you're providing diversions or distraction, as you call it, so that their stress level and anxiety level is reduced, and they're able to comply more. So you have a job in there, so you have to be comfortable with that and being in the room. And mind you, there are times when interns have felt like they might want to faint, but that's okay, still have medical doctors before, you know, so it's anybody really. But you have to be comfortable in that setting. I mean, I've seen a lot. If you want detail, we can talk about it later. But so there's that. But not only that, she's excited. She wants to see all the blood and gory stuff, right? And the trauma, yeah. So and then that. But the other comfortable thing is be able to also work with parents, because not everybody is comfortable working with parents. And so you have to feel like be comfortable in the sense that you have a voice in talking about their child as much in that setting, and so being comfortable with that, and also being comfortable with advocating, because if you're not going to say anything, it can actually harm situations a lot, and so there's that comfortness, of course, but yeah, that's, you know, a lot of the physical environment is what you have to be more comfortable with in that sense. But you also have to be comfortable with, you know, changes that you have to go through. You have, you know, possibility of the challenge of working with a child who's dying is also a possibility that you have to look into. But aside from that, there's also other rewarding things. Can I talk about rewarding things in here too?
Yeah.
Because this is kind of like a downer. But there are other things that are rewarding in the sense that you get to celebrate things with the children and the family in that sense. You know, I put together a quinceañera with a teenager who turned 15 at the hospital, but she couldn't go anywhere. She had her dress picked out, and her cord was gonna be there, but then she had to be in the hospital. And it ended up working out really well. And so little things like that are going to be important. There are, you know, some children couldn't go to prom, but prom can happen in the hospital. You know, so there are also those rewarding things that you get to do with these children. There was even a time we celebrated a 1-year birthday for a baby who's been in the hospital for a year, who turned a year in the hospital. So, you know, you get to also celebrate these things with you, and you get to also plan Christmas parties, holiday parties, and, you know, for, you know, Halloween, which is a normal part of childhood, they get to dress up and go trick-or-treating at the nurse's station and collect goodies, non-edible items, of course. But those are also some of the things that you get to help them be children and normalize their environment, which is really rewarding, so.
I think in order to succeed in county child welfare, one has to be comfortable with brokenness, namely broken children, broken babies. I mean, we've gone to hospitals to have these children evaluated. You know, hopefully no child has died while in my caseload, but we've been to hospitals many times on emergency response referrals where a child needed to be seen there because due to some parental action or neglect, the child is where the child's at. And it's just really sad to see. And you gotta be able to see that without crying, without breaking down. You just have to be strong while you're there. If you need to cry, go to the bathroom, do it back in your office, do it in the car. But while you're there interviewing them, you can't show any emotion. You have to be able to interview people and even interview the perpetrator of just some horrific things that they've done to kids, and be matter of fact about it. Be able to get the facts and be able to write it down and not let your emotion compromise the questions, what it is you're asking them, and during the course of your investigation. You have to be able to get all of that down. And I think just also working in county government, whatever it is that one may feel about county government, doesn't function as efficiently as we like them to function. I have many problems with government, but one has to be able to work in and accept the bureaucracy of government, and accept that if you're being told to do something, yeah, you're going to have to go do it regardless of whether you believe or whether you agree with your supervisor or not. you're told you have to go remove that kid, go get a warrant, you have to go and do all that. Hopefully, they would have given you time to process all that and why you disagree with it, but ultimately, their decision rules and you have to do what it is that they ask you to do.
I think some of the challenges that in our program, there's a lot of different cycles, like cycles of domestic violence, people self-medicating with substances because they've been hurt physically, sexually, emotionally. We deal with a lot of trauma of kids, a lot of sexual abuse. So being able to have that self-awareness, to be able to kind of, like as you were saying, kind of know what your limits are. But also, there was a good quote, and I wrote it down because I really liked it. I know I've talked about maybe kind of people where they're at, but just also being able to love them enough to not let them stay where they're at. But the quote that I was going to share was Marshall Jung. He's been a professor. He's been in the field for over, now it's close to 60 years. But he talked about compassion, and he had said, you become companions in pain, and you help hold others up when they're in pain. You have to be objective, and you hold others up until they're able to hold themselves up. And, like I said, there's a lot of different things. Deal with a lot of teens that have tried to commit suicide. They're running away. There's a lot of homelessness. There's a lot of history of severe mental illness that run in their families. And so to be able to come alongside of them and show them that there is hope, that there is encouragement, those times, I'm glad that you mentioned earlier about being able to share those good times, and I think that's what's helped me to be able to stay in this field so long. It's like when you can see change, when you can see a child or a family's lives get better, because they've been able to overcome the adversity that they're experiencing, and to be able to know that they can do that for themselves, and it's going to be sustaining. It's going to be something that they can carry with them for the rest of their lives. That's what keeps me going. And then there's challenges as far as you were saying, as far as the bureaucracy sometimes that can be something that is a challenge. But again, I think overall, just being able to empower others is a big gift that you can give to your clients and their families. So.
I don't have a ton to add. I think just when I saw this question, I thought of you are going to be as close to suffering as the client is, and sometimes that might be the one person that they tell that one thing, but they haven't told everybody else, and that's part of the gig. So it is. I think that is rewarding. I think sometimes you get to see that change. That sometimes, a lot of times you don't. A lot of times you kind of. I mean, there's a couple. Probably have 5 or 10 that I think about every once in a while. I hope they're okay. Statistically, if you do therapy full time through it, you're going to have a client commit suicide. And so that's just a part of the profession. I think another piece that's really hard, especially when you're working with kids, is knowing how to push the parents or how to stand up to the parents or how to bring the parents into working with the kids to see the picture from where you're seeing it. I think that was hard when I was younger. I think having a couple kids myself, I have a little more reputation, I guess, that I feel comfortable saying, how it is, like with kids, blah, blah, blah. But when I was younger, that was really hard to think of, I have to tell the parent that they need to do something different. Those are a couple challenges.
Great, so now I'm going to turn it over to you guys, so feel free to ask any questions, either general questions or if you want to ask specifically to a certain person.
So when you have a client that you think about from time to time and you have the therapy, how do you separate yourself from that, or from feeling like you have to help them and like you're obligated to?
Well, some of my clients, like, I can't. It's outside of the scope of my ability to help them, either because I'm no longer working with them in a clinical space. I had a kid, in the psych hospital. He was 4, and the minimum age was 6. So he was like the only young kid, and when my kid turned 4, that's when I was like, oh shoot, if my kid was in a hospital right now, that would be really heavy. So every once in a while I think about him, and I pray for him. I hope he's probably in high school now. It's maybe graduated from high school. I don't think you can separate yourself from some of these. You guys want to comment on that? You probably would.
I think in therapy, actually, I think being human, it's natural that, especially some of the situations that the kids are dealing with and the families are dealing with, it's hard not to be able to take some of that in. But I think also that's where objectivity is really important, because if you're not able to be objective, then you're not able to be able to help the client and their families. And so I think a lot of times they get, whether it's depression or if there's just a chaotic household or something's going on, they need to be able to have those eyes and ears and that objectivity from you to be able to help them kind of navigate. I think I was talking earlier about different cycles, like cycles of domestic violence, but there's familial cycles too of neglect or abuse, and a lot of times the parents that are the ones abusing the children, you can probably speak more, they themselves have been abused at one time, and so to be able to help them be able to recognize that, this is a pattern, this has happened, but those patterns can be broken and lives can be changed. And so that being able to be objective and be able to be empathic, but also be able to be knowledgeable, to give them interventions, but also to be model for them. So I guess that's where I would also kind of say, that's where that objectivity.
I used this in class, but you gotta put on your mask first before you can help the kid.
That's very true.
I think as humans, it's hard for us to completely separate. I've sat with parents and I've shed tears here and there, not completely bawling like they are, but when they're talking about abuse from their past, and yes, it's very much cyclical. I mean, we're here and we read what's in front of us, but when we look at a report, always come with priors of prior child welfare, and throughout the whole state, if anyone has had calls from the whole state, it's written on that report. And so we get to see priors for that child, prior for that child's SIBS, prior for mom, dad. We get to see it all, and it's hard not to cry with them. But I think the objectivity and be able to accurately assess the situation is also very important. Because if you just get into it with them completely, you lose sight of the job and why we're there.
And I think too, one of the things that I forgot to say was just to be able to have empathy, and that's just being able to relate to other people's experiences. I mean, there's all been times in our lives where we've been super depressed or super pissed off or, feeling lost. And those are all things that, regardless of age, gender, sexuality, whatever, that you can empathize with a lot of different things. So you can still have those feelings, but you kind of have to be able to compartmentalize it in order to be able to help your clients.
Yeah, pretty much, ditto. It's all about self-regulation and being able to, you do have to, because then you're thinking about, it's for them that, you're providing service for. She had a question.
How do you get a child of any age to kind of open up to you, being a stranger, being a complete outsider? I mean, me as a child diabetic, when I was first diagnosed and I had to to go to this doctor, I couldn't stand her. I hated her, and I hated her, the way that she expressed herself, and she was very dry, and she
Yeah.
had, and it was like I never wanted to open up to her. I never wanted to go to her, and, you know, as another human being, I mean, even me being on the other side, I wouldn't know how to kind of communicate with somebody whose situation I don't understand.
Yeah, so, you know, doctors, do have, a way of approaching, people, especially children. They actually don't know what to do with children. So this is where Child Life comes in. And so, you know, if you had Child Life specialist, you know, she would have been, with her background in child development and child psychology knowledge, she'd be able to know how to approach you based on your developmental level. Whereas in medical school, they don't really have that learning as much, more so than medical setting itself. So, and if that's something that you are interested in, take classes.
Right.
We have a lot of classes at within Child Life program here, and you know, you can actually take classes as a senior from our grad program here too. But you know, taking classes that teach you about children's development, learning about theories, and not just that, but going to places where you can apply that. You're going to end up having a lot of aha moments, like, oh, this is what they're talking about when they're talking about Erickson here, and I'm actually, you know, applying it here. This is, you know, what that's all about. And so, with time, you'll get there, and even with like language, you know, a medical setting has words that are not the most friendly words either. I mean, like they'll use words like expire for death and things like that to, you know, a lot of words that have two double meanings. So we would always clarify language for children and families actually to words that they would understand. So that's actually some of the things that I've had to do a lot, is actually educate a lot of medical students in their first and second year about how do you approach children when you go to clinic versus when you go to the hospital. So a lot of that comes into play.
I think too, just going back to everybody has different strengths, everybody has different interests. I know for me, our program, it works from ages 0 all the way up to 21. So we have a wide range of different students that we work with. And so for me, I'm way bigger than a lot of the kids that I used to work with. But being able just to kind of be able to play games and find out what is it, you know. Some of them are very guarded, especially like with the younger kids. Being able to have an activity, being able to have some animals or sand cherries or kinetic sand or Uno, you know, just being able to kind of, we get a referral, and so we kind of have an idea of some of the things that the clients have been through. But kids, they'll tell you a lot, either verbally or not verbally.
Right.
So like if, you know, someone's really guarded and their eyes are cast down and they're not responsive, you know, it's not, you can't necessarily take that personally. You know,
Right.
just, you know, it's just, to me it was a challenge. It was, okay, well, we'll find something, you know. And, you know, eventually over time, and again, kids are good barometers, and they can tell if someone's being sincere, and if they really care, or if they're just kind of shining them on and they're just here for the paycheck.
So would you say it's more of the person that you are, or what you learn, that makes you better at giving up things?
Yes, to both.
It's both, yeah.
Because I think, you know, as a professional and just as people, I think we're always learning and growing, or at least that's what we should be striving to do. And I know being able to have different interventions. So if I had I worked a lot with boys, but you know, so some were more verbal than others, some were less verbal. For those that were like sports, I would go out and play, but I love sports myself, so I would use the analogy of like if you're playing football and you only have one play and you just run it up the middle every single time, It might work once or twice, but if you keep doing it, one, it's the other team's gonna catch on to it, and you're gonna stop, and then you're gonna get frustrated, and it's not gonna be effective. So to be able to develop your playbook and have more plays, so the more interventions that you have to be able, and more coping skills that you're able to utilize.
Right.
Some kids don't like sports. Some kids like, music, or drawing or writing, And so I had one girl, she had 17 and she had tried to kill herself, but she really wanted to. She was a fantastic, phenomenal artist, and she would draw. She loved Disney paintings, and she would draw all the. You could name a character, and she could draw it freehand in like an hour. And I was like, ooh, I try and draw, and my stick people come out all crippled because I can't even draw straight. But like with her, we were able to get her involved in Disney had an art program that we were able to link her to, and she was able to go on, and she now works for Disney. So, it just depends. I'm sorry,
Right.
I'm kind of hogging.
And building that rapport with the children, getting to know them, is really important. And play goes a long ways. And it doesn't matter how old or what country. And so that's a lot of the time how you really engage children. And there are physicians and other medical professions that are really great with children. Yeah, absolutely.
I just got unlucky.
No, but
Well, and I think that's a challenge too.
Yeah.
Being part of any profession is learning how to work with different individuals.
Yeah.
And you know what? Maybe that person was just having a bad day or
Yeah.
a bad week or year. I don't know. But I tell my kids, my son last week just had to write an apology letter to his teacher. Well, some, but there's going to be people that you don't like, or but that doesn't mean you give up or you stop trying. It just means, okay, let's explore a different way of trying to find a way to help you with your problem and overcome it, because it can be done, but it might take a little more work, and people are like that too. So I think if you can show that you're genuine and that you do care, I think that's a huge part. Because if you can show someone that you care, then they're less resistant and they're more willing to buy in and kind of be able to allow themselves. So.
Do you have a question right there?
Yeah. So I know you guys have like masters and stuff like that, but what kind of job can someone like let's say they want to take a break in between and kind of work for a while, like right out of college, or like maybe 6 months out of college, someone with a bachelor's degree in psychology, what kind of job would they be able to get?
Yeah, I worked at a psychiatric treatment facility as a psychiatric aide, and that exposed me to, I got to meet therapists, and I got to meet teachers that were based there, got to get exposed to a lot of different aspects of the field. That was mine. Worked in a hospital.
yeah, you can actually, especially if you have child-related experiences and courses, you can be in the world of working with children and families with psychology bachelor, yeah.
Yeah, like after I got my psych degree, I worked for Pacific Clinics and was just help as an aide and just helping out in the groups. And there's lots of things that you can do.
Yeah, it's a broad field. So I guess I would encourage you to, is there a certain population that you might want to work with, whether it be adults or
Children.
children? Yeah, so depending on the agency, that I know in our agency, you can start as a mental health worker, and so they do a lot of linkage, and they link people, like kids and families, to different resources within the community, but they do much more than that. They also do a lot of rehab services and help kids learn how to do different things, be able to regulate their emotions, be able to have, help develop different communication skills and stuff like that. And so I know each agency kind of has different, entry levels, but, the more you're able to, everybody's life situation's different. And so we had 2 of our mental health workers, they're going back now to school. They want to go on and get their degrees and then eventually get licensed. But, you know, everybody kind of has to start, you know, where they're at. But, you know, just keep going. God's giving you that burden in your heart to want to help people and be with, you know, so, you know, it wasn't an accident. You know, God's put that there, so.
So I definitely want to give you guys time to say any last words or last piece of advice or just like a 30-second elevator pitch, whatever you guys kind of want to end on, and then we'll have time to network.
I just encourage you to ask questions, like go and say, hey, I noticed your profile on the Pacific Clinics, and I was just gonna ask if there's a position for bachelor's level, or ask your professor, or ask a professional in the field, or go. This is a time where you can explore, whether that's actually going into the field or asking someone in the field, and that'll help you figure out if this is what I feel. And there's no straight path. My grandmother, I'm sorry, it's more than 30 seconds. My grandmother had a doctorate in music, and just incredibly amazing, like smart woman, missionary in Mexico, grew up poor Florida kid. She said everything that she learned was useful, was used by God, except for hat making. She never was able to like use that skill, but every other skill that she learned, she was able to use. So there's no waste in your thing. So if you're exploring something and ask questions, those are my two things.
Yeah. I want to learn how to make hats now.
Yeah, you may not use it.
No, very true. Except for my head, yeah. Yeah, just, you know, definitely explore and ask questions. We're all here for you to help be a resource for you in the psych department. You have a lot of in the Department of Psychology, you have so many professors with different interests and paths and things like that. So, you know, definitely don't stop exploring and asking questions. And that's kind of also probably how you're going to end up learning more questions.
I think the sky's your limit. Just because you are in a psych class or chosen a psych major, you can always do double major. I remember having had so many jobs within a couple of months of each other. I remember interviewing this person asked me, well, why is it that you were at this job for 3 months and that job for 4 months? I'm like, that was just how it was. I was just exploring things. And if it's the right fit, then yeah, you'll get the job. If not, then move on to the next one. Your opportunities are just limitless out there.
For me, I'm gonna read because I gotta utilize that last 30 seconds. But I guess my thing would be that God gives everyone different talents, gifts, and abilities. Some remain constant throughout your life. Others might change during different seasons of your life. But it's very important to remember that God loves you unconditionally and loves us despite our brokenness. So to be able to share that with your clients or the people that you're working with, regardless of whatever setting, is one. And I guess the image that comes to my mind is, you know, God being the potter and we're his clay, and he's constantly molding and shaping us. And so being able to know that God, we may not be able to see the finished product, but God knows that product in us. And we're able to know that God is a loving God, and he's got a plan for us, and he's got a plan for the children or whoever it might be that you're working with. But I think as Christians, we have a tremendous opportunity to share God's grace, compassion, and love, and be a light to a broken world. And we have an opportunity to bring light to someone else's dark path, or at least point them in God's direction and let them know that hope is not lost, that miracles happen every day, and that God loves them deeply. And to preach, I know it's I can't remember who said it, but I always like this one where it says, preach the gospel always, and if necessary, use words. And I think regardless of whatever discipline you're in, if you can do that, you're going to make a major change in a lot of people's people's lives. So.
Well, one of the, following up with quotes, one of the things that
I
I've
like
always,
quotes,
yeah,
sorry.
I love quotes, this is one of my favorite quotes, is Nelson Mandela's quote. It says, "There can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children." And so that's definitely is, you know, one of the quotes that I go by, aside from, you know, of course, some of the meaningful scripture in my life. But if you like the idea of working with children, you know, go with it. Yeah.
Great, let's thank our panelists for coming. And feel free to meet our panelists or grab some food on your way out. Please make sure you signed in if you